Hello and welcome to Anatomy of Us. I'm your host, Melanie Studley.
What's up, my friends? My name is Seth Studley. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist and high performance marriage coach. And today we're hanging out with our good friend Dan. What's up, my man?
How's it going, guys?
Good.
It's so nice to have you here.
Yeah.
Yeah, good to be back.
Nice, nice.
We are looking forward to having a conversation with you about all things parenting. And I've gotten to know you really well over the last few months as we're working together in different projects. But I want you to tell our audience who the heck you are and what the heck you do.
My name's Dan Peterson. Obviously, I'm a licensed clinical professional counselor. Been working with challenging kids for almost 30 years now. Probably the last 10, 15 years, I switched to being a parent coach. And we can get into kind of why I made that shift in a little bit. But the other thing is I have three kids. My kids are 12, 14, 17. Been married for 25 years this November.
Nice.
Hey.
And fun fact, I'm the oldest of six boys. So,
Wow. That's crazy.
yeah, it's pretty insane.
So you had no sisters? You were the only boys in your family?
Yeah. When I moved out and went to college, the last thing my mom said as I was leaving is, "You can't come back because we got a dog." And they got a dog, and the dog was female. And my mom said that's the only daughter she's ever had.
Oh my gosh.
Your mom's so lonely.
Yeah.
But okay, so being a therapist and a parent coach, you must never have any problems with your own kids. Is that correct?
Yeah, my kids are perfect.
Yeah,
And
that's like
I got all the solutions. Yeah, you know, being in this work, I think like I have a lot of the right answers. I know how to help people, but it's kind of a double-edged sword because there's no way I'm perfect. My kids struggle. I have all the same challenges every parent does. So
yeah, absolutely. That's the one thing that people don't realize about therapists. We silently suffer. No,
No, you're human, you mean?
yeah,
That
we're
you're
just
human
we're just
too?
human, right? And
yeah,
it's really easy to give advice, and oftentimes we know the exact right thing to do because clinically we've had all these hours and all this stuff. But sometimes it's so hard, which I think makes us better therapists and parent coaches because we know how hard the work is. So it's not just
yeah.
somebody giving advice blindly. Like there's so many like 24-year-old single people out there doing parenting advice. I'm like, you don't even know, so
Yeah, you know that's actually a really good point because when I became a parent, I feel like my um the tools that I was teaching others all of a sudden had deep meaning because there was a lot of understanding and emotion behind it now. Like
yeah.
I truly knew what it meant to be sleep deprived or have a kid that attacks you because they were having an emotional meltdown. And
Right.
like personal experience, for me, it just helped me take my game to a whole new level. And
Yeah.
especially the challenges, the part that, you know, when I suck and I make mistakes or when my kids aren't responding to the things that are supposed to work, really helps me relate well to my clients because that's their day in and day
Right.
out.
Yeah, you used a phrase or a term early when you said what you do. You said you've been working with challenging kids. So
Yeah.
how would you define that? Like, what is your definition of challenging kids?
Kids that don't respond to typical parenting strategies, discipline, typically it makes it worse. So kids that are emotionally overstimulated, they can't regulate their emotions. They have these exaggerated emotional responses to things that maybe, you know, on a scale of 1 to 10 should be a level 3, but they're acting like a level 8, triggered by the word no, constantly creating like chaos in the home. And, you know, it just leaves the parents in this state of like, I love my kid, but quite honestly, I don't like being around.
Yeah.
And I feel super guilty about that. And just that dynamic, like it breaks my heart. And that's kind of why I transitioned from working with kids to doing help for parents.
Yeah. Now, in your experience, because I used to be a play therapist and have a lot of experience with kids, not as much as you do, of course. But in those situations, most of my kids had like really high ACE scores. And for listeners that they don't know this, the ACE is an acronym for Adverse Childhood Events, and it's like a rating system. Obviously, the higher your ACE score, the more trauma or stuff that you've been through. And these
Yeah.
kids had a lot of trauma, so behaviorally, it was easier to kind of trace back, like, oh, this you didn't learn any skills because your parents had trauma and all this stuff. But in your experience, are kids like high on the ACE scores? Do they have a lot of prior trauma? Or I mean, some kids like have great lives and just don't know how to regulate stuff.
Yeah.
Tell us about that.
Yeah. I mean, the families I work with, they have both. Some are traumatized. Some are just kids that are, I just say they're wired differently.
Hmm.
They have more energy. They have more intensity. They don't know how to regulate it. And it comes across as super destructive to the relationships in their life. But one thing I was thinking about, Seth, when you were talking about this is when I used to do therapy for kids, the kids that were traumatized needed therapy. They needed some kind of intervention to heal that trauma. And play therapy is one of the best modalities to do that because kids don't have the emotional maturity. They don't have the language skills to actually process through talk therapy. So you do it through play. But sitting down with a 6-year-old who has a hard time regulating their emotions, teaching them skills, expecting them to go generalize it in other environments, I just found that is like extremely slow process just because of their maturity. So I've just found that regardless if it's trauma or if it's just this intensity that they have a hard time managing, the parents need to know what to do in the environment where the kid spends most of their time to create an environment where change is possible. And whether it's trauma, and the parents still need to know what to do when the kids are in the home. Whether it's just managing this intensity, parents still need to know what to do. And oftentimes the parents are kind of the one that's the least educated and the least equipped person on the whole treatment team.
I had a list of 1,000 questions to ask you, and now I don't want to ask you any of them because I want to ask you like all the ones that are popping up into my mind. But I would love to know, from all the years that you've been doing this, like what would you say is the parent's role? So I'll give you a quick backstory. One of our kiddos years ago had I don't know how long, it felt like a year, maybe it was 6 to 9 months of severe dysregulation. And we were like, what do we do? This is breaking our whole world apart. As a mom, I was like, I'm completely lost because we are very, emotionally available parents. We did everything right, we thought, and still this thing was happening. And I love what you were saying about kids being wired differently. I often think one of my sons, they just wired everything backwards. like when you wire an outlet wrong, and when you turn the light off, it turns on.
Well, backwards, but not incorrect.
Not incorrectly, just different from my other 2 kids. But so I'm curious to know, if you could have met me then, what would you have told me was my role and my responsibility in the next, however long it was in working with my kid?
The way I like to look at this is it's the parent's job to be their kid's expert.
Ooh.
My mission is to train and equip parents to be the best therapist, the best coach, the best parent. And a lot of times it's just they're working from the wrong set of tools for their specific kids' needs. And when you have a loving, caring, well-adjusted parent that is not thriving in their relationship with the kid, it's agony. It's really easy to start to blame yourself and feel bad and feel shame and guilt and worry. And good luck parenting effectively when you're kind of processing through all those emotions.
Yeah.
So, a lot of times parents will rely on the mental health field as experts, a psychiatrist or a therapist. And kind of my mindset around this is, no, you need to be the therapist. So you have a whole lot more, especially if it's not a trauma case.
Yeah.
It's like if you can create an environment in the home where the kid's getting what they need and what's going on, what not to do, what to do, you're going to get change a whole lot faster, and it's much more sustainable too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
And when parents, this happens to every therapist, everyone that I've talked to, and me too, we get kids brought to us or teenagers, and of course, what do they say? Hey, fix my kid. Some actually have said that to me, like, I'm not a mechanic. But then others, it's implicit or like kind of covert. Hey, fix my kid. I don't know what to do. And then when we start to getting into family of origin issues and stuff like that, it's like, then it becomes the parents. Ideally, they realize, wait a minute, I can affect change much more than I previously thought. Or they say, whoa, that's way too hard. I can't even deal with my own stuff. This isn't working. I'm just going to ignore it, right? That for some reason, PCIT came into my mind, parent-child interaction therapy, and we used to do that a long time ago. And it was essentially the parents being the therapist. They were getting coached, and have I ever told you about that? It's like a one-way mirror with a headphone thing, and the therapist is telling the parents what to do when they're playing with their kid.
Oh, no, I didn't know that.
It's pretty cool.
That's cool.
But it's essentially, the parent is learning to do therapy or whatever you want to call it. You don't have to call it therapy, effective treatment with their kid. And the kid's just like, whoa, who's this? My dad has never showed up this way, and it's great. Right. But they're getting real-time coached, and I mean, I like that. That's what you said. Like the parent is the number one therapist, and when parents can realize that, it's number one, helps the kid, right? Number two, really empowers the parent. Like, oh, I do know what to do. I am willing to learn these tools and get coached, i.e. what you do, coached by someone to go home and do this. And then it was so cool, like when you see the kids and the moms or the kids and the dads like having a good interaction, and like they maybe embrace or maybe hug, for the first time in a long time, and like the parent knows that the kid was real in that and they just cried. I mean, that's happened with our kids.
Oh yeah.
After some blow-ups and stuff like that. And it is such a good feeling because both of you just like exhale and go, man, we're here. The kid feels safe. You feel accomplished. You did your job as a parent. There's nothing really that feels better than that as a parent.
Well, and I want to say really quickly before I ask you another question that was one of the things that was the hardest lessons for me to learn in dealing with our kid, was that I had to learn that I was a massive trigger for him. And it was like, I thought I was like, no, I have the answer. I know the right thing. I'm going to say the right thing. But then Seth was like, you make it worse. And it took me a really long time to, number one, believe Seth.
Your face makes it worse.
I didn't say my face made it worse. Just your face, lady. But it was super helpful to realize that. And then to have to be like, oh man, that gives me a whole new set of steps on how to work through this healing process together. But I wanted to ask you, so my goal in...
Can I say something about that real quick?
Yes.
Just what's really interesting about that is it can be a double-edged sword if you're not humble and open enough to like look in the mirror, because there's a whole lot of power that comes in that statement. When you realize like you're the trigger, you're the problem, and you have awareness of this, now you have power to make a change. When you're not willing to accept that, you're not willing to look in the mirror and it's somebody else's fault, and you're completely helpless because you can't effectively do anything differently. You're dependent on someone else to change. So helping parents see that, especially parents that are open to that, is so freeing for them because they don't feel like they're chained to this helpless state or helpless feeling.
Yeah, absolutely. And
it gives them hope.
Yeah, that brings me to a couple of the different things that I wanted to ask you is like, now I'm going to talk about from a parent perspective first. What do you witness when you work with parents and you see that like aha moment where they realize that their behavior has actually been making things harder? What kind of behaviors are you typically seeing in them that aren't helpful? And then what switches to being helpful? Is that clear? That question clear?
Yeah. So from a parent, like what are the parents?
Yes, from a parent perspective.
Yeah. Yeah. So have you ever been told that like as a parent, you should be able to control your kid?
Yeah.
There's that myth out there. Just so you know, that's like the biggest line of BS ever. There's nothing you can do to control another human being, especially a child. And if you think you can, these children will bring you to your knees super quickly.
Right.
The truth is parents, when they feel like their home's out of control, there's this impulse to try to control it. And so there's yelling, there's escalating. I call it stress-based parenting, where you're like really desperate and you're either going to try to control your kid with yelling, threatening, escalating punishments, or you're going to bury your head in the sand, the flight model, which is you just tolerate and put up with stuff that you know you shouldn't be, but you don't know what else to do. And so when you're in that state all the time, you have anxiety, you have worry, there's all this tension and conflict. And the work that I do is helping the parents realize that it's not your fault. You're not doing this intentionally. You just have the wrong set of tools. So let's like give you some awareness of that, throw those other tools out that aren't working, and then replace it with what your kids need. And once they start to experience progress because they're doing things differently and they're leading and creating a different environment, and then their kid starts to improve in behavior as a result of that, you start to see like joy and peace and love reestablished, as opposed to chronic stress and worry and anger.
Yeah.
That kind of my mission is to restore peace, love, and joy back in the home, kind of the way that it was designed to be, and helping the parents be the agents to create that change rather than the cause of all the conflict.
Yeah, for sure. And then that brings me to the question about the kids. Like, what are the actual, like, what are like 3 behaviors? And I mean, like hitting, yelling, fighting, like what are they? Because I know that if I were to listen to this podcast and my kid was exhibiting a behavior, I would probably be like, well, They just said challenging kids, and maybe mine is beyond that or not, whatever. So give us like a list, if you can, of behaviors that you go, people should reach out to me if their kid is doing this.
Oh boy. Um, I yeah, I've seen some really extreme things. So,
Mhm.
I hit, kicked, screamed, punched, spit on. I just kind of put that in the category of aggression,
Mhm.
both towards the parents and towards the siblings.
Mhm.
That's pretty common. The other one is just these emotional dysregulated states
Mhm.
where they're crying, screaming, Yeah, ask them to get ready for bed or get ready for school. And instead of it taking 20 minutes, it takes 2 hours.
Mhm.
Everybody goes to bed exhausted. You tell them no, or there's a time to transition from a desired activity to something else. And it's, 25 minutes of negotiating and crying and screaming and begging and pleading. You're constantly negotiating with your kid. Those are like the typical things. So a lot of the other stuff too is they have a hard time in like social settings.
Mhm.
So they get in arguments and conflict. Maybe they're lonely because they can't keep friends because they keep stressing out the relationships. But
Mhm.
um, those are primarily the main things that I see.
Mhm.
Mhm.
And what age? So, for example, I'm thinking of a few people that immediately some people came to my mind, and I go, oh, I wonder if they should reach out to Dan, but their kid is like 5. Is that too young?
No, my specialty is kids between 4 and 12.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason I like to work with that is because that's when parents have the maximum input
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
and can evoke the change, and the kid's old enough to start taking a little bit more ownership and have more self-control and regulate themselves.
Mm.
Mhm. And even for a kid, like I've never once talked to a kid, clients or my own, or I mean, I guess they wouldn't answer this, but after an emotional meltdown, after like a dysregulation period of time, kids are exhausted. Like they
Mm.
Yeah,
don't
Yeah.
enjoy feeling that way. It's like
right.
for adults, it's like I hate it when I get like angry.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't feel good. Like when we feel
Yeah,
that discord and you just feel it in your body, kids don't want that. But like one of the beautiful things about your work is like you help kids. So this is actually a a thing for the parents to really think about. Parents, you can help your kid not feel terrible. I
Yeah.
know I know that sounds weird, but
Yeah.
if it is in a parent's power, which it is, to help your kids, to give the tools to your kids, to equip your kids with the emotional bandwidth to help navigate their own emotions and have them not feel like crap after a huge meltdown and there's all kinds of shame and guilt. What a gift. Like we've been able to do that sometimes with our kids, not every time, but it's like going back to what I was saying before. It's just that like emotional release of like, oh man, I feel better now. Like I was heard, I was listened to. I controlled my own. I've had so many kids like, hey, dad, or not, well, my kids and other clients, like, hey, I wanted to like get mad and scream at my teacher, but I didn't. Really?
Mm-hmm.
You didn't? Why? What? Tell me about it. What were you thinking? What was going on? Well, I learned the thing that we talked about, and I thought of like the little bear, and if we're doing like cartoons or characters or something,
yeah,
and I knew that bear would feel better if you didn't do it. I didn't do it, Mr. Seth or whatever. They feel like 100%. Like
yeah,
how do you think they're going to show up in the classroom in that home? Like when
Mm-hmm.
they
yeah.
can get control over that kind of stuff, and
Mm-hmm.
that's what you do, which is amazing.
Yeah, and there's something that I'm after helping create inside kids, and it's something we call inner wealth, which
Mm.
is a belief that I'm competent, I'm valuable, I have what it takes,
Mm,
and I have something really important to offer the world. And when kids, even kids with challenges, are operating from that belief or that identity, um, they're going to be doing the very best they can because they believe in themselves. The other part of that too, like that you were talking about, is when kids start to succeed and they start to manage and regulate themselves and they're leveling up, their confidence starts to grow.
Mm-hmm.
They're
mm,
willing to take more risks. And the more risk you take, the more success you have, the more competency, your confidence grows. That becomes like your new narrative, your new story.
mhm.
Um, yeah, because kids, when they fail, when they have emotional meltdowns, when they're out of control, they don't feel confident. They don't feel
Mm-hmm.
equipped. They feel miserable.
Yeah.
That makes me think of something that I've noticed, which is really crazy because I've noticed this a lot in parents of very little kids, like toddlers, they will tell, and this is not every parent, obviously, but when an adult tells their child, you're naughty, like you're naughty, and then the kid will start to say, well, I'm naughty. And how much power parents have to speak into a child's mind what they believe about themselves. And especially now, listen, we know how incredibly hard it is to deal with a kid that is dysregulated, that is constantly challenging, that's causing fights with siblings. I mean, we were run over the coals with one of our kids. But the ability, the sort of that awakening aha moment to be like, I have to change how I talk to my kid. I have to be the person to breathe life and confidence, and you're a good kid and we're making better choices now. Like, I have to be the one to lead that charge for my kid. And so often, because parents get dysregulated, they will say awful things to their
dysregulated stuff,
dysregulated things, and then the kid interprets that and goes, well, that's me. I'm mean, I'm bad, I'm naughty, I'm whatever. So I don't know, that just popped into my head and I wanted to say it, but I have another thought that I want to say. So I keep thinking that I wonder if parents don't know their role, like in raising humans. Like if we don't realize, like, we're supposed to be a guide,
like the importance of their role.
Like if we had an image that would be helpful here, what image would it be? Like, I'm totally putting you on the spot here, Dan, sorry.
Gandalf.
But Gandalf. It's kind of funny. The kids are all the hobbits.
They're little.
Yeah, I guess I don't have a clear picture. Actually, I do. It's like a guide that's taking you on like an expedition through the mountains. You've never been through the mountains before. You don't even know if you like the mountains, but you don't have a choice. You have to walk through this area. And if you don't have a guide or you don't have someone with experience that can kind of teach you how to survive through that and actually how to enjoy it, it's like super dangerous, right? It's not fun. The first time I took one of my kids hiking through the mountains, he complained for like the first 2 days. And then when we get in the car and he's scrolling through all the pictures, he's like, this is the greatest vacation of my life. I'm like, wait, what? But like the end of our hike through these mountains, we're jumping off like these cliffs into ice water, and swimming through currents to the other side. And he gets to the other side. He's like, Dad, I didn't think I could do it, but now I do. Now I have confidence in myself. And I think like just that guide and like the adventure guide is specifically, that's kind of the picture that for me, I see myself as the father, as a parent. That's the way I want to lead my family or lead my kids.
Yeah, let's take it one step further and help create a visual. So like you talked about, I know this is a hard thing for lots of parents, where that transition from a desired, like an iPad time, to we got to get ready for school or whatever. How do we act as a guide? I want to offer as many really practical things and sort of highlight your abilities and skills for people, because this is the hard part. Like, how do you take that guide out in the wilderness and translate that to, I'm in my kitchen and my 10-year-old is losing their mind because the iPad timer went off and now I got to negotiate again, for 25 minutes before they just stop yelling or whatever. So how do we take that and make that work in that scenario?
Yeah. So I'm kind of give the 30,000 foot view and then we'll get like specific, but I'm always juggling 3 different things that we need to bring to the table. And you have to be doing this like proactively up front to really be efficient in the moments where there's chaos, crisis, conflict. But I'm always thinking about, how do I build up my child? How do I connect to them? How do I help them see themselves as competent and successful? So when you have a kid that struggles with transitioning, they need to be flexible. They need to be competent. They need to be able to regulate disappointment and handle adversity. So how am I proactively pointing out time and time and time again where they've been able to do that, so that they see themselves as someone that's flexible, that can handle disappointment, that has confidence, has courage, whatever the qualities are. So I'm doing that up front. When the meltdown happens, I want to make sure that I'm not participating in that in any way. And I have super clear boundaries for myself so that I don't get sucked into that. I call it just like the trap, or, it's almost like somebody's fishing and they're dangling that lure in your mouth. Because which comes to like the third part, which is you have to be really clear on what your expectations are and what you're going to tolerate and what you're not. And just because he's ticked and he's upset and he's having a meltdown because you said no and it's time to get off, doesn't mean it has to become your problem.
Mm.
You know, if you view discipline as it's my job to teach you how to manage yourself as opposed to it's my job to manage you, you're going to have a whole lot more peace and not take that bait time and time again.
Mm-hmm.
And so, okay, you want to get upset, you want to regulate, you're entitled to that, but I'm not going to participate in that by negotiating, trying to convince you to calm down. It's just you're either in bounds or you're out of bounds.
Mm-hmm.
When you're in, I'm going to give you lots of great feedback, build you up. When you're making a mistake, it's an opportunity for you to learn and practice how to regulate yourself,
Mm-hmm.
how to deal with disappointment. And if you can't handle this privilege, you say, well, this privilege needs to go away for a while. But
Mm-hmm.
like, I'm not trying to manipulate you
Mm-hmm.
and try to get you to stop or try to get you to behave differently. I'm giving you the freedom to choose that. But I'm going to hold you accountable. I'm just not going to get all wrapped up into that. And
Yeah.
for me, you know, that's not always easy, even though I know that.
Mm-hmm.
But the more practice, the more reps I get in, the more reps and practice the parents get in, a lot easier it is to detach from those outbursts and just,
Mm-hmm.
you know, hold them accountable, whatever that looks like. Like, I think a lot of times parents want to be like, what's the magic consequence that I should give when that happens?
Mm-hmm.
And to me, that's the wrong question to ask.
Mm-hmm.
It's how do I not get sucked into this drama and just hold them accountable in a way that makes sense. So you're going to throw a tantrum around the iPad. Well, that privilege needs to be on hold until you can show you can regulate yourself again.
Mm-hmm. You know,
that can be in 5 seconds or that can be in 5 weeks. It's up to you.
Right. Yeah. It makes you think of the adventure analogy of like if the guide got wrapped up in the drama of the person who was afraid to jump off the cliff or to do the like zip line or whatever the thing is, your adventures that you're doing. Imagine what that would look like. Like the kid starts freaking out. I can't do it. And then the guide goes, you're right. We can't do it. Ah! Like who's leading? No one's leading, right?
Yeah. Or sure you can. And if you do, here's $500.
Right. Right.
You know, that's what we get into. We get into the bribes and, you know, trying to barter with kids to get them to obey or to regulate themselves. And it just gets in the way of them experiencing the opportunity to manage and learn about what they did wrong, how they can do that differently. It's all experiential.
Yeah.
I've never thought of it that way. Like as you were talking, I'm like, oh, wait a minute. We're delaying, like if we like negotiate and get involved in their drama and stuff like that, we are delaying the maturation process that the kid needs to go through, right? So honestly, you're prolonging not having peace, not having joy, not having, you know, a home that's quiet and connecting. And that's where a lot of parents, us included, have not seen that, you know? So I'm really hearing have clear boundaries, have clear expectations, and then stick to those. And anytime that where we have like laid down, hey, if this, then that's, you know, tough stuff. Sure, it might be hard for a minute, but then the long-term thing, and I mean long-term, like an hour later, the kids are fine, you know? And that taught them something. It's like it's very comforting to know that the person responsible for feeding and clothing and housing you is going to be consistent in everything, discipline and boundaries included. That's really, really good for a kid.
Yeah. When you get kind of sucked into the drama or you start trying to barter with them or negotiate with them, you're actually robbing them of the opportunity of leveling up. You know, I just look at anytime a kid is challenging or struggling or misbehaving, it's revealing that they don't have a skill that they need. Whether it's, I don't have the skill to express myself. I don't have the skill to, you know, calm myself down when I don't have even awareness of how to articulate that. I don't have the skill to manage frustration. So anytime they're struggling, it's a great opportunity to practice that. Why do I want to like rob them of that?
Yeah. That's such a good point. And then if that is not dealt with appropriately, what happens and what do we see all the time? Like the kids get an entitlement victim mentality. Well, they wouldn't let me do this, or I couldn't do this because you did something. I'm like, no one's stopping you on anything. It's just you're so used to that pattern. You're reliant. It's not learning those skills that they needed. So they become reliant on other people to help them self-regulate, to help them dictate what they want to do or not to do. And then that's one of the worst feelings in the world. It's like, okay, well, I'm just powerless and pissed all the time now.
Yeah. I have a really good example of what we're talking about. I just had a coaching call this morning with a mom who's been, implementing and working on these strategies with me for the past 2 months. And she caught her 9-year-old on the internet, like on a site she shouldn't be on. And so, so the mom said, you can't be on the internet. You can't have that device. And the kid just went nuts, like angry, yelling, screaming, wouldn't talk to mom, locked herself in a room. The mom didn't participate in that. She gave the kid space to like blow up, to protest, whatever, but she wasn't going to give in. Mm-hmm. And this kid wrote this real long letter and called her mom every name in the book, swore at her, put it in a nice sealed envelope, slid it under her door at night. So mom wakes up to this note, and then proceeded for the next 40 hours to stay in her room and refuse to talk to mom. Mm. Now, everything in mom's instinct was to go in there and try to make it right, right? To connect and but she gave her kid the space to work through all that frustration and disappointment. Mm. At the 48th hour, she finally came out of the bedroom, walked up to mom and said, "I'm really sorry." I gave her a kiss and said, "Can we have something to eat now?" Now, that was miserable 48 hours, but what the mom did is, I was clear with what my boundaries are. I fully believe that you're capable of handling this disappointment. Now patiently wait for you. Mm. And as the kid walked through it, the kid got to the other side. So the kid gets credit for calming themselves down and getting back on track, which is what they need to have over and over and over again to have some confidence.
Yeah. I mean, kudos to that mom for sticking to 48 hours, and kudos to you for coaching her through it and like getting her to realize how important these boundaries are and things like that. So yeah, that would be hard.
Yeah, it'd be really hard. Well, and it's interesting, even just the way you're saying it, is that you're allowing the kid the time for them to process it. And really, I think when we jump in so frequently as parents, whether it's helping our kid tie their shoes or cut a piece of toast or get dressed, we are not allowing them to gain the skills necessary, whether that's, an emotional regulation skill or a physical ability skill, And I love sort of the overlap there. What tools do you think are the most, like, either tools or things that parents should know? Like, what are like 3 things that you found are the most impactful or come up the most frequently with your clients? Like for us, family of origin is always like a huge one, the clearing structure. So are there things in your work that you're like, yep, these 3 to 5 things just always show up?
Yeah, I have like 9, but I'll give you 3.
Oh, you can give us 9.
Well, I look at this as a tripod. There's these 3 stands that you need to have. And then within those stands, there's like 3 specific tools to use. But I think the thing that's the hardest for parents is if you love your kid, whenever they're doing something that violates your value system, you're going to be activated or triggered. And the fight or flight center of your brain actually gets turned on and says, go put that problem out, get it to stop, or it's too much, I can't take it, so I'm going to run and just like turn the other way. Mm-hmm. And so convincing parents or educating parents that when you get activated, it's because your values are violated. That is the absolute worst time to engage with your kid, because there's no learning that's going to happen when you're trying to confront your kid with their misbehavior. The flip side, or the paradigm shift, is if you really want more respect and kindness and obedience, or whatever your values are, the time to connect and to bring that to their attention is when you have evidence of that happening. Mm-hmm. And so you're confronting your kids with, I see that you're managing your frustration really well right now. You're disappointed with that answer, but you're not acting out. You're not yelling, screaming. You're still working through it. It takes a lot of courage. It takes a lot of self-control to be able to do stuff like that. When you're teaching those values, when you have evidence, real-time evidence of it happening, kids are really open to learning, and you're deepening the connection between the parent and child, as opposed to that impulse to get them to stop, get them to stop being disrespectful, stop being disobedient. That's not the time to engage. That's not the time to have a conversation, because kids are just goes in one ear and out the other, or they just shake their head, but nothing's being absorbed. Mm-hmm. Or what happens in my family is anytime I go down that road, my kids are like, it was so-and-so's fault, or I did that because they did this first. It's like excuses.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
That freaking drives me crazy.
Same.
So like those are like two tools. Is one is don't engage in instruction, teaching, learning right after or during misbehaviors happening, but really proactively teach these traits and values and rules when you have evidence that they're being followed. The other tool too is when kids misbehave, if you can intervene in a way that helps them to look at what they're doing and have some self-reflection, and then they correct it, the more reps you can get with that, the quicker that they're going to regulate, they're going to take ownership, and then their confidence goes up. A lot of times parents try to influence the outcome or get the bad behavior by threats and bribes. Just like, if you don't stop, then this is going to happen. Or if you want that, you got to do this first. And it makes the kids like want to barter, or I don't know how you guys feel about this, because like at younger ages, I think kids are a little bit more interested in this, but I found so many times kids make decisions based on, well, what do I get if I do the right thing?
Right. Yeah. Right.
And so you that's not the way the world works. You know, you do the right thing because that's who you are. At least that's the type of kids I want to raise. So there's this tool, it's called reset. So anytime kids are doing something they shouldn't, I just use a code word. It's called reset, which means is stop what you're doing, think about what you need to be doing, and correct it. And if you do, I'm going to point out how you solve that problem, as opposed to you did something wrong, so here's the penalty, here's the punishment, and you're bad. And I've just found that art of resetting, it's a life skill. Now, I'm sure there's times where you guys make mistakes or do things you shouldn't. You kind of have this awareness that maybe I should stop yelling right now. I'm kind of lost control. That's the art of resetting. And when you can start teaching kids that at a really young age, and they start believing that, hey, I do have regulation, I do have the ability to control myself. Yeah, I'm impulsive, but there's times I can manage that impulsivity and reset and get back on track. They start to see themselves as having those qualities. It's just a much easier way to discipline, in my opinion.
Yeah. And then it becomes part of their identity. Like, and that's just who they are. Oh, we just do the right thing. And we know what to do if we kind of get off track and end up doing the wrong thing. It doesn't mean that, oh, I'm the worst kid ever, or we don't internalize all this stuff. It's like, oh, dang it, we got off track. Okay, but I know what to do to get on track. Here we go.
Yeah.
What other ones did you have? Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say, in kind of an activity I do with a lot of the parents, and so I used to work in like behavioral health hospitals, so I used to run groups doing this activity too. But the way I look at kids is they're not born with an identity. They don't know who they are. They don't have thoughts and beliefs about themselves. That's kind of given to them based on, the parents, the teachers, significant adults, how they connect. So I kind of look at this as when kids are first born, we as the parents were the authors of this biography. We're writing a story about who they are. And the words that we're actually writing on the page are the words that they're not necessarily the words that come out of our mouth. It's actually the timing on how we connect to them. So if every time a kid's emotionally dysregulated and yelling and flopping, and we come over and we try to calm them down, we're actually saying, I see you as emotionally dysregulated, as incompetent, not knowing how to control yourself. That's why I keep connecting and engaging and spending time with you on that. So we're actually writing down in this story about who they are is you're a kid that melts down, can't handle the word no, never goes to bed on time, because every time they behave that way, we connect. But if we do that over and over and over again, at some point we hand the pen to them and it becomes an autobiography. Right. And then they just start acting in a way that's congruent with the belief they have about themselves. Right. So the intervention I do is I have kids, I like make these books, and I have the kids write down 5 positive things about yourself and give me proof. Right. So, I'm a really good friend because when I saw Johnny crying, I went over and gave him a hug. Or I saw, the teacher calling him names, so I came over and yelled at the teacher. I'm a loyal friend, something like that. And then I have them go home, and I said, all right, I want you to find 5 people in your home to add additional proof of who you are. And what we do over time is we start building this autobiography / biography about the truth of their greatness, about who they are, what their qualities are, but it has to have proof in it. And once kids start participating in that and the parents do, it really gives them a really clear path on how they want to engage and connect moving forward. Because I don't know about you, but when you lose your patience with your kids and you actually write down in their book, I see you as an out of control kid. You don't listen well. You're not responsible. Is that something you would want to read out loud for everybody to know?
No.
Of course not. But we actually do that when we spend a lot of time and connection and energy around the problems. So once parents have awareness that I'm connecting and giving energy to the problems, I'm actually saying, this is who you are. This is how I see you. And then they're able to say, oh, crap, I don't want to do that anymore. And then you give them a pathway to write a different story, one that they're going to be proud to read out loud. And then they have to start finding evidence to support that. It's a real game changer for the dynamics and the paradigm in the home.
That's cool, because it's like you're empowering the concept of health. I know that sounds a little bit simplified, but I don't know. I think that I can keep thinking, people keep coming to my mind, friends of ours, or even experiences that we've been through, where I think of situations and responses to a dysregulated child as being like you're connecting through dysfunction. And I think one of the things, and I just wanted to say this, that when I realized I was a trigger for our kid, that was the first sort of insight that I had to have. But then the second one, and this was huge, and I would love to know your thoughts on this, because I don't think I've ever heard anybody talk about it from a parenting perspective. I grew up in a home where conflict was totally normalized. Like, that's how you connected. We connected through being like having different opinions, but it wasn't loving. I mean, let me be very clear about that. It wasn't like fun conflict. It was like, you're wrong, let me tell you why. And that's almost the only way that we got to talk to the people we cared about, was through that. And I realized from our good friend Paul, actually, you know who Paul is. Paul and I love to argue. It's one of our favorite things. And I had this realization. I'm like, oh my gosh, it doesn't even bother me to argue with our kid. In fact, it kind of makes me all like, what's that word? Like I'm all like I'm firing on all cylinders. Like I get to like do the thing I love. I love to argue and I love to solve problems.
That's why we have arguments. No, I'm just kidding.
No, but really, that is one of the reasons we had so many arguments.
I'm not kidding.
For sure. But also it played a huge and very negative part in parenting, because I had a kid who also loved to argue. And I didn't realize that that was something I was sort of putting into motion, because he would bait me. He would put out the bait. And I would happily take it, because I'm like, well, I'm gonna talk to this kid for 2 hours now. I mean, think about how awful that is. You can tell me it's awful. It's okay, Dad.
Well, yeah, it's just god awful. It's terrible. I don't know what you were thinking, but the interesting thing about it is that was something that was very familiar and comfortable for you.
Yeah.
And you probably didn't have awareness at the time that you're just on a default mode with what made sense. My wife says this to me quite a bit. She's like, why do you need to create so much stress or wait for things to get really bad? Why can't you just be comfortable where it's like easy going in peace? I'm like, because that is the environment I grew up all the time. I feel more comfortable in chaos than I do in just like stillness. Trying to meditate and try to like just be clear with my thoughts and not have all these things going in, like that is a really uncomfortable exercise for me. And it's just because my nervous system isn't wired that way.
Right.
But having awareness of that, now you can do something about it, rather than just beating yourself up for not being able to do it differently.
We go to what we know.
And it just makes me think again, that guide idea, being out in the wilderness and like I'm supposed to be my kid's guide, and he starts arguing and I just argue back, and so we're just standing there arguing with each other about what to do, and I'm not realizing like, oh, I'm supposed to take us to the next step. Like it's my job.
If your guide, if one of the tour people says, oh crap, and then the guy goes, oh yeah, oh crap too, and then you go
double crap,
then like nothing gets done. But so often that's exactly what we do in parenting.
So I have an interesting perspective on that. In my experience, when kids are dysregulated, like internally they're out of control, they're super dependent upon the environment, the parents, to have a sense of calm and safety, to reestablish control and safety for them. And when kids are out of control and they can't regulate, and then the parents out of control, what the parents are actually communicating is, you really need to be worried about this, because not only can you not control it, but the most powerful people on the planet, they don't know what to do either way. So let's be really freaked out about it. And it's really scary. It creates a ton of anxiety and stress for kids when the people that should know what to do to remain calm and have order, they can't handle me. So like I should fear my own intensity.
Yeah. And this goes back to like that's not a secure attachment. That's anxious attachment, which then we see like avoidant attachment and all that stuff, because it's like, oh, hey, I'm having a behavior here. I need an anchor. I need an anchor. I need something to hold me down. I need some guidance. Looking to you, the parent. Oh, you don't have it? Okay, now I'm just floating. Now I'm just in the wilderness, and that's not good.
Yeah.
And just doing the anything. Go ahead.
Yeah, and the interesting way that kids go about saying, I really want boundaries. They don't ask for it. They don't say, hey, I need some boundaries. Can you help me here? It's F you. It's I'm not doing a damn thing that you said. You know, and it's their like really maladaptive way of screaming for boundaries, but it doesn't feel like that at all.
Yeah.
What's wrong with you, kid? That's what it feels like.
Yeah. And I want to say, I just realized how, I mean, the time has absolutely flown and we've been talking way longer than I realized. So we do have to wrap it up, unfortunately. We should have you on again. I mean, I would love to ask like pointed question each time, basically make you into a part of our show. I like that idea. But one of the things I think that I want you to just talk on for a minute, and then we'll transition to how people can get a hold of you and find out more about your work, is I want to talk about a parent's role in regulating the nervous system of their child, that's like something we are supposed to do. So could you just speak on that for a second? Because I don't think many adults realize that that's actually our job and we need to do that. So what does that mean to you in the work that you do, and how do you explain it?
Yeah, well, I mean, when kids are born, their nervous system isn't mature and developed enough to be able to calm. That's why when kids are crying and screaming, they're swaddled, they're held against the mom, and the mom's calm nervous system helps them learn to regulate their own. And I think as kids get older, they still need calm, in control, emotionally regulated parents that can handle their chaos. I don't know. For me, I know when kids are at their worst, that's when I want to be the calmest. That's when I want to be the most steady, because I think them seeing a regulated adult, a regulated human, when they're out of control, helps them see what it looks like, what to do. And then it actually helps diffuse a situation. And they just, again, they need a lot of practice at that. Kids that are out of control, their nervous system's all haywire. They don't need control. They don't need people getting all frustrated and upset. That just lights their nervous system on fire. You know, they need the people around them calm, cool, consistent, regulated, so that they can help kind of calm themselves down.
Yeah.
At least that's been my experience.
No, that's awesome. Thank you for sharing that. It just popped into my head. So how can people get a hold of you, learn more about what you do, and work with you?
Yeah. So like my area where I spend about 95% of my time is coaching parents. I have a 90-day coaching program to help parents learn and master a new set of tools that can help like really flip things around so that there's lots of really good connection. Kids start to learn how to regulate themselves. They get better faster, and it's in the environment where the kids are struggling. So my website is The Compass for Life. Best way to reach out to me, just get on my contact page. Let me know you listen to this show. I'll reach out and respond to you directly. Maybe you can set up a phone call, get to know you a little bit more, and then see if it makes sense to work together.
Yeah, awesome. And we'll have links to your website in the show notes and all of that, and we'll share it all out. But thank you for spending time with us. I mean, your knowledge and the insights that you have are amazing. And I'm really hoping that our audience will reach out to Dan. And especially listen, if you have younger kids that are showing signs of this, reach out sooner rather than later, please.
So that's a great point. If I could go back when our kids were little and be like, oh, wait a minute, this will save you. And we're not doing it like just to save shows like, hey, do this now or you'll regret it. I'm not saying that. If you want a more enriched relationship with your kid, like to reach that potential, not only for yourself, but as a loving parent, you can give your kid this as well, which will benefit them for the rest of their lives. Like, reach out to Dan. I myself have, just in this conversation talking to you, Dan, I realized a couple of things about regulation, about all kinds of stuff, boundaries, especially like the negotiating things with kids.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, oh man, wait a minute. I need to sit down and really think about how I interact with our kids and where have I failed in that? And I'm not shaming myself or anything, but becoming aware of it and going, oh, I'm going to use some of these tools to like do some repair and then also to better equip our kids for their future. It's not really about us, it's for their future too. So that's just some things I learned just in this hour talking to you. So I thank you for that. I appreciate it.
Yeah, my pleasure.
Absolutely.
Can I just say one other quick thing too?
Yeah.
A lot of the parents that hire me are the ones that their kids are really dysregulated. They're kind of in crisis. Like the cool thing about the work I do is this is for all the kids. I mean, specifically kids that are struggling, but if you have multiple kids, this is going to help them level up in like all areas. It's not like a specific intervention just for your challenging cot. It's a way to raise kids.
Yeah.
You know, there's a lot of people that have the training I do that do marriage retreats or do executive coaching and work in the like judicial system. This model that I use is really a human relationship enhancer, but specifically for challenging kids. It just really helps raise the ceiling and the potential for any connection. So
absolutely.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, thank you again for being on the show, and we'll get people sent your way, and everybody better go your way who's got especially littler kids. I would give anything to be able to go back in time and have had you in my back pocket when we were going through stuff. So thank you again, and have a wonderful rest of your day.
All right, man. Talk to you later.
Thanks, guys.